So Matt and I have presented this presentation almost 30 times already, going out to all of our buildings, to our staff, PTOs now, just continuing to get this information out there. When we go out and present to our buildings, we have to make sure that it's informational only. Today, we don't have to worry about that with all of you. This can be persuasive as to why people should approve this referendum. Renewing the referendum at a reduced tax rate is what we're going to do. So I'm going to go through the first part of this, kind of giving everybody the reasons why Crown Point is different than a lot of places, the reasons why people should even consider voting and supporting this referendum. And then Matt will come up and he will give you the mind-numbing data, as we like to call it. And Matt does a really good job with numbing everybody's minds. So we'll get into it from there. So Crown Point Schools, the whole reason that we exist is to compel students to become lifelong learners, and we do that through the highest quality educational programs. And you'll see as we go through here, many of the things such as the facilities that we have done with the state-of-the-art improvements. Looking here at one of the media centers in elementary school, all of our media centers now and all of our buildings have been updated and improved. And again, intentionally designed so that we can provide our students with the latest technological advantages as they go through. You can see here the community growth from over the last many years, but you can now our population, when you put in the 3 different communities that we serve as well as the unincorporated part, we're up to just over 55,000 residents living within our boundary. We've grown by 1/3 since 2010. So while we've experienced some pretty rapid growth, we see that now stabilizing, as you guys are well aware of, with the demographic study that we've had. We expect that to really slow down and be steady, 100 less, fewer than 100 over the next several years. The average homes in our community is at $336,000. That puts us in the top 10% of all public schools within the state of Indiana. And when you compare it to the median home value here in the state, it's at $267,000. You can see that this past year, our AV, so think about all of the homes, new businesses within our communities that have been going up, our AV has increased by 14%, which again, we are outpacing every other school district within Lake County. The reason that that is important is as we look at this top number right here, that 336,000, when we have our graduations in early part of June, we graduate 750-ish kids, yet our 6th grade or our kindergarten students, as they come in, we're only at about 600-ish, so there's a big difference there. But we see that change catch up when we get to 3rd grade. A big part of that is we feel like as people are coming in and affording the homes that are within our community, many times they're a little bit further along in their career, their families are more established, so as they come in, their kids are a little bit older than they would be if they were coming in at kindergarten. Thus the reason for that increase as we get into 3rd grade. So you can see here by the chart the consistent growth that we've seen, almost 300 students in the last 5 years. Again, as we talked about, we see that leveling off. Crown Point High School is now the largest high school in the region with just over 3,000 students. And again, people are moving here, and a big part of that is because of our schools. So with this, a big portion of, the biggest portion, almost all of the referendum dollars that will be coming in are about staff, about teachers, about teacher recruitment. We're recognized as a destination district, as we like to call it, where we're attracting the highest level of educators to come here when we have openings. Really feel like our reputation, because of our teachers and how they talk to each other, because of our community members, parents, people want to be here. We have among the highest starting teacher salary in the state at right at $59,000. What that means for everybody else, our average teacher salary is in the top 5 in the state as well. Last year we had 12 elementary position openings. We had over 80 applicants. So when we talk about teacher shortages across the state of Indiana, across the country, here in Crown Point, we're not necessarily experiencing those as others. And again, going back up to it's a destination district. People want to be here. They see the value of Crown Point as a community, and again, as our corporation, and how we work through putting the emphasis on our greatest resource, which is our human resource with our kids. All of this then leads to that consistent and committed staff, where the culture of the district, the culture of schools continues to be there and doesn't have to be adjusted each and every year. A big part of what we did with this group of projects that we are just on finishing up this summer is really about the academic success and how do we prepare our kids for the future. So you're going to see as we go through this, all of this is anything but average. This past year, the high school was recognized by the College Board for Excellence. Think AP courses. We just approved the grant today, this morning, for the AP assessments. Our students, our high school received a silver recognition, and that was because of the number of students who are taking AP courses, but not just the number of students, also the number of at-risk students, the number of minority students who are taking AP courses. Dual credit is another area that our kids can participate in. You can see here that this year we expect almost 10,000 credit hours to be earned at the high school. Now keep in mind, our high school is 3,000 students. This is more than double what many schools our size are producing on an annual basis. And you can see how that has continued to increase as we go through the year. The biggest advantage for this when it comes to parents, for those of you who have had kids going through the schools or are in that process right now, students can graduate with up to 30 credit hours earned, and that could equate to a cost savings of almost $11,000. But it's not just about kids going to college. So as we go across the state, as I go across the county, I hear people say, I think it's even been an article in the paper where we need to put shop class back in high school. We've all heard that, right? Shop classes have never left Crown Point High School. As we go through and we look at all the different things here, kids not only are going away to colleges, but they also then can get their CTE certificates. They can get ready to go right into apprenticeships, into technical schools. With the new facilities, we're able to add the CNA program at the high school. So this year, our students can go through and actually graduate with their CNA certificate. You can see the hospital bed here. The facilities that our kids are working in are as new and up to date as any of the new hospitals that have come into our community over the last year or two. Some more things that really set us apart and make us way anything but average, way above average. So we're in the top 5% of Indiana high schools, top 10% of best high schools in the country. We have a 4-year graduation rate of 97.36%. You'll notice the state average again is 90.11%. This one is really above average. Our honors graduates, so students as they go across that stage and get their diploma at graduation, 57.5% of our students are graduating with an honors diploma. The state average is 40.3, so just 17% higher than the state average. Attending post-secondary institutions, Crown Point, 92% of our students do this. This isn't just college, universities, this is also technical schools, this is Ivy Tech, right through wherever they need to be. A big part of what we did as we expanded our elementary schools and added on to all of them was so that we could add STEM in our creative arts rotation at the elementary level. So now for the first time ever in Crown Point schools, every elementary student goes through and has STEM class once a week, just like they would PE, art, music, media center. A big part of this is we had 2 different curriculums that we're using for this. The first one was called SAM Labs, and it's really, we use that first semester. It's a lot of coding. Second semester now we're into Project Lead the Way, which then leads right into middle school and on into high school. But in our first semester of having STEM classes in our elementary schools, our students completed more projects, just over 6,000 projects than any other school corporation in the country using SAM Labs. So again, pushing forward with how we rolled this out, it's anything but average. Again, always striving to achieve excellence. Performing arts, we were just talking today about the play that several of us went to over the weekend, the orchestra concerts, band concerts. Our kids just do an amazing job, and the benefits that they achieve from that or realize from that just continues to grow. Buzz and Friday night lights with football. Who doesn't like to spend Friday nights with 4,000 or 5,000 of your closest friends with fireworks, things going around? And while Buzz and the football team is up here, this really isn't about football as much as it is about the extracurricular opportunities that our students have. 7 out of every 10 students at the high school participate in at least one extracurricular activity. Many of them 3, 4, 5. But that's how you take that 3,000 student building and make it seem smaller and more manageable for our students, is they're involved in other things as well. This is a list of achievements since August of 23, and it's just going to scroll. While it's scrolling, you're not going to keep up with it, but focus over here. You're going to see speech and debate, tennis, basketball, softball, dance, all these different events that are going on. So it's not just athletics, not just fine arts, not just high school, not just middle school, not just elementary, but across the board, you can see that we continue to strive for excellence in everything we do, and the achievements have been many. One of the ones that I am most proud of, it makes me smile every time it comes up, not intentionally, was the last one on the list is Best Buddies. So in 2024, we were the elementary chapter of the year. We've been working really hard on inclusion here over the last 3 or 4 years, making sure that all of our students are our students. And you can see that in the things that we've had, all the activities, the Crown Point High School Ballers that many of you were at. Again, really striving to have that inclusion piece as a big part of it. At this point, we're going to turn it over to Matt for his data portion of this, and we'll go from there.
In 2019, so since the last time we had the referendum in 2018, the state changed the funding for schools. So my presentation is going to talk about 3 areas. First area is going to be state support, the money that comes from the state. The second part is property taxes. And then the third part is going to be talking about the ballot question we're all going to see on May 6th. So the state changed funding in 2019. They really broke it down into essentially 4 different funds for us to work with. 2 funds shown here, the education fund and the operations fund. For the education fund, I want you to think instruction. If it's instruction related, it gets paid out of the education fund. Everything non-instructional comes from the operations fund. Now, we're going to talk about some blue money today, and the blue money represents the money that comes from the state support or the funding formula that the state legislature, as you're aware now, is currently going through and devising a 2-year funding formula within the 2-year budget. As that gets done, the state legislature determines through that funding formula how much money every school district across the state is going to receive per pupil. For us, 85% of that state basic grant goes into the education fund. Now that 85% of the funding formula makes up 98% of the revenue for the education. The other 15% goes into the operations fund. Important to note is that 15% makes up almost 50% of the revenue in the operations fund. The other pieces that changed in 2019 is they did away with the bus replacement, capital projects, and transportation funds. All 3 of those funds were, and now inside the operations fund, are funded through property taxes. So again, if half the money comes from the state support and operations, the other half comes from property taxes. The third fund I want to talk about with this is the debt service fund. And you heard Dr. Terrill talk about the projects that we're just wrapping up. It's important to note that all of that gets paid through the debt service fund, all of the debt that we issued. So think of that like your mortgage on your home. The difference between the mortgage on your home and the debt that we pay is that when you do a mortgage, you have a mortgage on your home for approximately 30 years, with the idea that when you retire, your home is paid off. The difference between that scenario and what we work with in schools is that our debt is 20 years, but the other most important fact is the schools never retire, right? So we reinvest that money back into the buildings, which is what we've done to just complete all the projects we've been working on. So let's talk about that blue money a little bit and look across the state. This is a scattergram of every school district, both traditional and charter, K-12 in the state of Indiana. You'll notice down here at the bottom is Zionsville, the lowest funded per pupil at $374, $6,632. The state average is $73.74. You'll notice some schools are below the state average as we bring up some: Munster, Hanover, Lake Central, Duneland, Griffith. You get closer to the state average as Hobart pops up, along with Lake Station, River Forest, and Gary, number 6 in the state. The 5 above that are all charter schools. Gary, as a traditional, highest funded traditional district at 88.95, you'll notice the difference between Gary at 88.95 and Zionsville at 66.32, approximately $2,250. Now you may wonder, where do the Crown Point schools fall in this? As you can imagine, we're near down the bottom at 347th or 68.35. Now, if we just received the state average, you'd be looking at additional almost $5 million in state funding coming from it. That blue money coming in, almost an additional $5 million. And as you heard Dr. Terrill present, nothing about what we produce with those dollars is average. Everything is above average and outstanding. However, our funding significantly below average. Now, the other interesting point about this scatter plot is every single one of the districts on this has passed the referendum. In fact, 1 in 5 districts across the state have passed referendums. Let's look at our state support. Back in 2009, $5,200 per pupil. In 2024, $6,835, as we just mentioned. That may sound like quite a bit when you're talking about a $1,600 increase per pupil. You have to remember that's over a 15-year period. That equates to an average annual increase of 31%. However, you need to take into account inflation over that period. Over that same time period, inflation grew by almost 50% in that 15-year period. If we just kept pace with inflation, our funding would be $7,800 per pupil, or an additional $8.5 million coming in that blue money. It's interesting to note that our referendum fund generates about $8.5 million in property tax revenue. So let's look at those Lake County school districts that tax rates across. What you'll notice is River Forest at 266. Again, the blue represents both capital and operating referendums that are currently in place. You'll notice Crown Point falls right in the middle of that at $1.22 with our 18-cent referendum rate. It's interesting to note those that don't have blue bars means they have all but one have gone out and tried for referendums, and you'll notice that those have failed. In fact, 15 of the 16 districts in Lake County have tried for a referendum. Only one is not, and that's Maryville. Let's talk about the referendum rates as they come through. You'll notice River Forest high at $1.16. Crown Point is the lowest, a referendum rate at 18 cents. Let's talk about how that money gets spent here at Crown Point Schools. So, and for the most part, this has been consistent going back to the initial referendum run in 2011 to 2018. How we have spent that money has been very, very consistent. You'll notice that 19% goes for safety initiatives. Since 2012, the first year of the referendum, every single nurse in school in Crown Point has been paid for out of the referendum fund, both salaries and benefits. We've also enhanced our SROs through this process as well. 49% goes for academic and educationally related programs. What does that mean? Back in 2012, it was determined that all elementary art, music, and PE teachers would be paid for from the referendum. Every secondary art and music PE teacher would be paid for from the referendum. On top of that, every non-athletic extracurricular activity, so think math bowl, spell bowl, many of the things that you saw Dr. Terrill scroll through that we've received recognition for, all paid for through the referendum. 6% goes for retaining teachers and staff, and then 27% goes for managing class sizes. That is strictly used at the elementary level. Approximately 3 to 4, in some places 5, teachers at every elementary are paid for out of the referendum fund. The most important point to point out is, though, 27% plus 49%, 76% of the funding for the referendum goes for teachers and staff to provide programs for students. That money is going directly back into the classroom for all of those teachers. Also, it equates to almost over 70 teachers that are paid for from the referendum fund. So let's talk about the ballot question. This is the ballot question in 2018. You'll notice those things that are underlined are the items that you control as a board when you pass the resolution. So in 2018, 7 years was set up. Now it's important to note that when you passed that in 2018, you passed it for 8 years. The year before, the legislature gave the ability for schools to run 8-year referendums instead of 7. However, Crown Point was one of the first ones to go back for a renewal of that referendum. When you passed this ballot language in 2018, it was done for 8 years. When it goes down to the state to be approved, the state says, no, you can't. You're renewing a referendum for 7 years. Therefore, you can only do a renewal for 7 years. Therefore, the question that was posed to everybody was for a 7-year renewal. Why is that important? 7 years plus 2018 puts us directly where we are right now in 2025. That's why this campaign is happening now. You also notice at 21 cents, and then the purpose of what the funds were used for was also outlined before. So let's go to 2025. This is the question now in 2025. Again, the underlined portions are the items that you control as a school board. You'll notice then a year after that determination was made by the state that you couldn't do an 8-year, they came back and said it was okay. Therefore, this year we're going for an 8-year referendum. Again, the purpose is outlined, and the other piece of this is we're talking about changing the maximum referendum rate from 21 cents to 18 cents. Now, we would normally use the words decrease or reduce, but those are not allowed because that would be unduly influencing the voter. Important thing to note is you'll notice in the non-underlined areas that the word increase is used 4 times. It's really frustrating because we're actually decreasing the rate that we're allowed to ask for from 21 to 18. However, if the first time you see this question is when you go to the ballot that day and all you see is increase, and oh, by the way, you see percentages of 21 and 20%, it's going to be very confusing. It's important to note that this is not an increase. We're actually decreasing the rate, and I'll show you that. Let's first talk about how property taxes are calculated. If you had a home with an assessed valuation of $100,000, the standard homestead deduction is $48,000. You then get to take another 35% off of that number. That therefore making your net assessed valuation $33,800. You divide that by 100, multiply it by the rate of 18 cents, produces an annual impact of just under $62 or $5 a month. So let's talk about our tax rate history. If you look back to 2017, the tax rate was $1.38 with a 21-cent referendum rate. You'll notice that trending downward and staying at the 21-cent referendum rate until 2024, where it was down to 20 cents. And then in 2025, this year, we're down to 18 cents. What you'll also notice is as that trend continued down, $1.38 down to $1.22 this year. Now, as we've talked many times during our budget sessions, our range for our tax rate was between $1.30 and $1.40. As our assessed valuation grew, we were able to take that range down between $1.30 and $1.20. As I was coming in the legislature at this point, I'm fully anticipating more than likely a decrease unless we see a huge decrease in the assessed value, which some of the bills are calling for right now. However, let's talk about how that 20% is calculated. The county auditor has to go through a formula. It's about 30 to 35 steps. And when they go through that process, this 18 cents comes off of that, and they essentially compare it to what the tax rate would be without the referendum. That's how they come up with the 20 cents. And as I've shown you, and will show you, that's not true. That's 20% increase is not what happening. We're actually going to see a decrease. So let's talk about year over year, 2024 to 2025. The total tax rate, now this is the highest tax rate, total tax rate. So this would include the city, the library, the county, the township, every taxing entity that you would face. For us, the highest rate is in the city of Crown Point. The total tax rate just under $2.75 in 2024. In 2025, we're at $2.63. Now remember, our rate went from $1.28 to $1.22, or a 6-cent decrease. So of that 11-cent decrease from 24 to 25, we're actually a little more than half of that at 6 cents. Let's take the median valued home. For us, $308,500 produces a gross tax, using the calculation I just went through, of $4,654 in 24 and 25 down to $4,461. But you have to remember we have tax caps, and everybody's under the 1% tax cap. $3,085, you're only going to pay 1% of your median home at $308,500. Now, the referendum tax goes on top of the tax cap. So you have your tax cap, and then the referendum gets placed on top of that. You'll notice in 2024, that's $349, in 2025 down to $310. So your final tax bill in 24 would have been $34.34, and 25 down to $33.95. What does that mean? It's actually a 1% decrease. In no part of that question do we talk about the decrease that's taking place when you look at the question that's on the 2025 ballot. Let's look at a little different scenario. In 2018 at 21 cents, the last time we ran the referendum, gives you different levels of homes from 100,000 down to 400,000. I'm going to focus on that 308,500 because that's the median value. Median value, $355 was the impact of the referendum back in 2018. For that same valued home at 308,500 in 2025 at 18 cents, that's $309. Important to note, when you look at the difference, it's down $46 from 2018 to 25. So while we talk about the 1% decrease from 24 to 25, we're also talking about a decrease from 2018 to 2025. The biggest part to take away from this is not a tax increase. Remember, the question says it's a tax increase 4 times. The most important part, it's not a tax increase. It's actually a decrease.
Thank you. Well done. So as you can see, the takeaways from this are a little complicated at times. As we look at the assessed value and how we're outpaced every other school corporation in our county, I think a big part of that is because of who we are as Crown Point Schools. We're not taking credit for the fact that as a property owner, my taxes have gone up as my assessed value has gone up on my home, but the value on my home has gone up significantly over the last 4, almost 5 years now. That's a big part of what we do here. When we looked at moving here, my wife and I came up and visited, went around the community 2 different weeks. Everything was about Crown Point Schools, Crown Point Schools, Crown Point Schools. It's not only us, but it's a great partnership. But as you saw, those things that make Crown Point Schools different, many of those things paid for because of the referendum is all because of this. The challenge that we face is, as you pay attention to the rhetoric that we're hearing across the country, the rhetoric we're hearing across our state, is that public schools this, public schools that. Here in Crown Point, we've been fortunate to stay above the fray. We don't get involved in all of that stuff. We have solid educational experiences for our students, for our teachers who work here with us, and this is about getting that message out. But as you saw, that question where it says increase 4 times, when we're actually decreasing that, this is the biggest challenge that we face as our community members go to the polling centers to cast their vote. The first time, and Matt mentioned this, that they read that question can't be as they're standing there ready to make their vote. It can't be, okay, so I've seen signs, I've seen materials, I've seen presentations, that everything said it's a decrease, but here 4 times it's saying it's an increase. We're not going to get into why we think it's an increase 4 times and not allowing us to say decrease. That's beside the point. What we've got to do is, and we'll actually have a calculator that'll be both on our Friends of Crown Point Schools Facebook page and on our website, where people can actually go in and put in their address and see the decrease, and they'll know what they paid last year, what they're going to pay this year because of the referendum rate. So that is the message. We think it's incredible value that people will get for this as we continue to move forward with it. But our message that we like to end up with is we're asking you to renew our referendum at a reduced tax rate moving forward.